How do you understand the whole provision, the law to begin with, when Jindal initiated this tenure or no tenure kind of thing? How did you initially understand all that to be?
Well, he was hell-bent to rush through all this legislation, and he was able to do it because he had a lot of legislators that had absolutely no intestinal fortitude whatsoever to question it. If they had questioned it, they would have seen that it had multiple instruments in one act, which an act can only have one. And so when Judge Caldwell initially ruled, he said, well, the title of the act was about teachers. That's why he let the teacher tenure in. When they went back and reviewed it, he recognized that, no, the title was not a teacher. The title was actually Act 1. And that's when he said that he went back to review it and said, I think there was something like 14 different components in this one particular Act 1. And that's why it was found unconstitutional. Just goes to show you that it was never about accountability. It was never about teachers. We would love to talk to them, but we were locked out on the Capitol steps. It was all about rushing through this legislation, and without truly taking the due diligence to look at it and to sort it out and to see what needed to be done with it and to ask for input for the people that were going to be impacted the most. That was a complete failure. The long and the short of it is the governor and the legislature, they got it wrong.
So how do you think this will affect tenure in general? Do you think they're going to just go back and represent it since they're going back on April 8th? Do you think they're trying to figure out a way to...
I think we stay on the course we're on, but knowing that it can change at any given moment, and I think that the local districts will probably be very reluctant to do anything until they see exactly how it's going to finally be reconciled in the courts. But I think that we probably won't get the final answer until it goes to the Supreme Court. So in a tenure case, we had an old tenure law, and now, well, first of all, tenure is still tenure. It's just the way that you would lose your tenure would be two different methods. So I think the board will probably be real reluctant to implement either of those until they know which one is the appropriate one to use.
And how does it currently work now?
Well, before the law or now in the law?
Before the law.
Before the way the tenure used to work, once you had been in a regular situation, in a regular classroom, as a regularly certified person for 3 years plus 1 day, you were considered tenured. That didn't mean you couldn't get fired. That tenured teachers lost their jobs. That was part of it. That was always something that people put out there to make it sound like that was something you got that allowed you to have lifetime positions. That was just untrue. What it amounted to, there was a due process piece in place as a tenured teacher that there was only certain things that you could lose your job and the board had to do it. It was, it was incompetence. Well, obviously, if you can't teach, they charge you with incompetence. It was a misconduct, like, that you did something inappropriate. Again, as a tenure teacher, it's just that the board was the one, and you had the right to go before the board. Administration didn't take that from you. So that was the difference in it. And now what it amounts to as a tenured teacher, you would go through what I call a tribunal, which would be somebody the superintendent makes, the superintendent, the principal, and somebody that the teacher appoints. And it would be a 3-man panel that would decide. But then ultimately the superintendent could still weigh in on that after, let's just say it didn't go the superintendent's way. He could say, well, that's what you said, but I still don't agree that this person should be employed. Now, we've not yet seen that play out because we've not gotten to that position yet. So you can see that it already has some issues in it that would not feel like you would really be getting a fair shake at this. But, I've been doing this job since 1995. I've seen very few people that didn't realize before those first 3 years that they didn't belong in the teaching profession. Yeah. Generally, what we have is keeping people in a position to get tenure. That's what we see more so than anybody getting tenure and then staying in a position so that they can, read a newspaper, which is the common thing that people like to say about teachers. Listen, I challenge anybody out there that thinks that it's an easy thing to be a teacher to come into the classroom and do it. And I'm not even going to tell you to stay a whole day, stay a half day. And I think that you'll change your mind about what it's like to be a teacher in our public school systems or in any school system today. And when I say any, that means private, parochial, whatever. It's a different world that we live in today. And the challenges are greater because there's so many more things that are going on in the world today. And we just have to recognize that.
And what do you think will happen next? You think there'll be another piece of legislation that will come up on April 8th that may put this situation into that piece of legislation?
Well, a couple of things I would certainly hope. That we'd not see again, that we would not see teachers locked out on the Capitol steps. I think that it was as gender biased as you can possibly get. I don't believe any other profession would have been treated that way. and you can challenge me on that any day you get ready to do so. The other thing is, I don't think any other profession would have been questioned to the extent of, why are you here today? It was very demeaning the way teachers were treated that day, whenever they were there literally fighting for their professional lives. So I don't think we'll see that again. I pray that we don't. The other thing, I think that surely the legislature will have learned their lesson by then to know that you can't rush this through, that if it's really that important, and nobody says accountability is not important. No teacher has ever steered away from that. But ask us how, and ask us to give our input in what would be the most effective way to do it. You know, as we say, we're more than a test score, and students are more than test scores. Ask us how this needs to be done. And, you know, and if we could come to that, you'll probably see some things, but I would hope and that our legislators will be more circumspect this time and allow teachers to come to the table and work with them so that we can have a product that's good for our teachers, for public education, and the end result for the boys and girls that come in our classrooms so that we can fulfill the promise to them that they can have a quality public education.
Since we're kind of talking about, we've got now the voucher system is now going back to the court system, or going back to the legislature. You have this particular situation. Do you think there's anything else that's going to come up that you guys have been dealing with that will end up either coming back against Jindal and what's been passed, or there's this whole issue like now they've got legislators talking about putting in a bill that would give I call it a bye-year, kind of wave this year off for teachers. Do you think anything else coming down the pipeline that's kind of been a sticking point?
Well, I think that the biggest platforms in his reform were Act 2. They've both been found unconstitutional. You know, what else could they bring forward beyond that? Do I think they're going to bring piecemeal pieces of it? Yeah, I think they'll bring that back. Now, are we going to bring pieces that we think are relevant? Of course we're going to bring pieces that we think are relevant too, such as asking for that to be a bye-year. There's some things that happened with extended sick leave and maternity leave and things like that last year that you'll see us bring some things forward on those kinds of things too. Act 1 and Act 2 were his biggest pieces, but there were other pieces that came down the pipe too. What I would just love for people to believe is that, you know, to go into public education is really a calling, as much as if you were a preacher to me. That's what most people believe, that they want to come back and give back to their boys and girls in their community. And that we would have respect for people that do those things, and instead of vilifying them and tearing them apart and trying to undermine everything that they've ever stood for, that we would come together as a community and say that this is intolerable, the way that teachers have been treated, and we'd say we appreciate what you're doing and we're not going to put up with this type of attack any longer. That's what I'd like to see happen.
Cool. That works.
Okay.